One of the problems with recruiting for investment banking is not the knowledge or skills you acquire, but the access to talk with real investment bankers to put your best foot forward. Our sponsor, WSO Academy, can provide those connections with 60 head mentors who are finance professionals at top firms like Goldman, Centerview, and JP Morgan. Imagine being able to get on the phone within 24 hours with one of the Academy's 1,300 mentors right before a critical interview. Get on the waitlist for WSO Academy today by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting wallstreetoasis.com/academy. All right. Welcome to Investment Banking Insights. This is the only show absolutely dedicated to helping you learn both the technical and non-technical aspects of the investment banking process. Hello, my name is Alex Mason, and I am your host, back for another one. It feels good to be back in the saddle. You know what I'm saying? Just a second week of podcasts, and school is in full swing. I'm recording this close to midnight after a long day, which ended with a really great session here at Cornell Johnson School of Business for our investment banking immersion. Already learning so much through that course and excited for some more assignments and learnings here to come. But today I want to talk to you about video interviews. These first few weeks here in season 2, I had a collection of things I wanted to talk about last year, but I just didn't find the right fit for these kinds of topics. So this kind of content has kind of accumulated over time, but I did want to get to it. So today is about video interviews. It's actually a Q&A question. If you have a question about a particular concept or any sort of question related to anything investment banking, please email me. Email me at investmentbankinginsights@gmail.com. That's investmentbankinginsights@gmail.com. And the link is in the description, in the show notes of this episode for that. But just send me an email. Many of you have sent me emails, some just to say what's up, say hello, say thank you. But some of you have specific questions, and I want to help you answer them. So this one is from Shay, and I know this is a lot later than when you sent me that email, but hopefully that I can share my answer, not just with you, but with many others who need help with this. And actually, I did email you back right away, now that I think about it. I just didn't talk about it publicly. So let's go ahead and talk about how to approach video interviews. So there is a common trend in the investment banking universe, and even more generally in, I would say, the business world. If you're recruiting for a position, a lot of companies will screen you out first with a pre-recorded video interview. And this is really interesting because it kind of changes the game both for candidates as well as for recruiters and companies. In the old days, it was literally just your resume and then maybe a phone call where you heard someone's voice and talked for a few minutes, and then based on just those few pieces of information, there was a decision about whether or not to move you forward in the interview process and then to meet face-to-face and go through with the interview. But now, because video streaming technology is becoming even more ubiquitous, especially since the pandemic a few years ago, it is now pretty common practice to have a pre-recorded video interview as part of an interview process. And this is certainly true in investment banking. I did a handful of these myself when I was recruiting for my internship. And so multiple people have actually asked me about this. And there's some best practices that I want to share with you, things that I've thought of, things that I've learned from other places. As someone who is also a content creator, someone who's had a YouTube channel before, someone who's been podcasting for 6 years, there's some things that I picked up along the way in terms of how to present yourself over the internet, because it's a skill and it's a little bit different than when you're meeting someone in person. So the first thing that I would say is, first of all, if you're doing one of these interviews, get some practice talking in front of a camera. This is probably the number one tip that I can give you on this subject because it's just so critical. It's not natural at all to speak in front of a camera or even a microphone if you're doing something like a podcast. So try recording yourself on Zoom or even more simple on your phone. Just take out your phone, put it on selfie mode, and then just hit the record button and start talking. And then stop after about a minute or so, and then go back and watch the result and critique yourself. A lot of people, when they first hear themselves over audio or when they first see themselves over video, they're like cringing, like, I hate the way that I look or I hate the way that I sound. But I want to just snap you out of that right now. Love the way you look. Love the way that you sound. You are you. You are amazing, and you're going to get this job. So you should look at yourself with delight. And so just enjoy the process of being in front of the camera. And when you do, look directly at the camera lens. Remember, that camera lens is actually what's recording you. So if you're looking at the screen or looking off to the side somewhere, then that makes the viewer feel like you're not looking at them. So that's another important thing, is look directly at the camera lens and just get some practice with this. This is probably the hardest thing to overcome in this whole process. What you don't want to do is get a high review interview for an investment bank and you say, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and knock this thing out, and you have no practice at all and you're not used to talking in front of a camera, and you go and hit record and it just comes out terribly. Even if the content of your answer is good, the delivery is not going to be nearly as good as it would be if you practice. So go ahead and do some practice runs with your phone or with your webcam on your computer, whatever you have available to you. Another tip for you, make sure you have decent lighting that makes it easy to see your face. I have been on so many Zoom calls, both professional and personal contexts, where the person in the video, you could barely see them, or there's like this weird shadow on a side of their face, and it's just tougher to communicate. Remember that most communication is actually non-verbal. And so when you have this video component, you can see the facial expressions, you can see the body language. Well, if you're not shining a light on yourself in some way, if you don't have good lighting in your room, you're just making it that much harder to communicate with the interviewer, with the decision maker on the other end of that call. So make sure you have decent lighting. And a lot of times, just some YouTuber tips for you here. If you have a room in your apartment or in your house where there's good natural light from the window, use that. Like, try to do this video interview when there's lots of sunlight shining through the windows, if you can, and have that light be hitting you directly. And that right there can often be enough if you're in a well-positioned environment. If you're not in a well-positioned environment to get natural light for whatever reason, that's okay. Just try to find some other lights in your house. If you don't have something directly overhead on the ceiling, or like a floor lamp or something, try to find some kind of table lamps. Whatever you have available, just try to position the lights so that you can be seen clearly and visibly. Now, obviously, you don't want to like blind yourself with light or anything like that, but usually more light is better, usually. So make sure you have decent lighting. Another tip, and these are all like super fundamental, but people miss these things all the time, unfortunately. So forgive me if I'm sounding rudimentary, but these are important things. Make sure that you dress professionally. If you were doing this in person at an office at a bank, you would be probably dressed in some kind of a suit or some kind of formal wear. Make sure that you mimic that behavior virtually. Just because you're maybe hundreds or thousands of miles away from the people who are going to be viewing this in their offices doesn't mean that they don't see you as a professional. And so you should present yourself as a professional. I remember doing my video recordings for some banks, and I was tempted to just sit there in my sweatpants and my t-shirt and just go ahead and start talking to the camera. But again, this is a very big impression. So I went ahead and just changed into like the full-on, collared shirt and dress shirt, made sure I had good lighting. At the very least, present yourself as if you were going into the office. You don't necessarily need to go all out and wear the whole suit and tie, for example, but definitely look presentable. And when you're sitting there or standing there, make sure that you're upright completely. You don't want to be hunched over, leaning too far forward. That could be perceived as like whoa, like too eager. You don't want to be all up in the camera, like zoomed up really close on your face. You also don't want to be leaning way too far back. You don't want to appear disinterested or just kind of there. No, just stand up straight or sit up straight, whatever the case may be, and point your head directly at the camera and start talking. So those are some things that you can do just with your physical body and with your environment that are going to make a huge, huge difference. And then another thing is you want to make sure that you practice your fundamental questions. The higher views and the pre-recorded interviews that I have personally participated in and that I've seen or that other people I know have participated in are relatively simple. Remember, these are going out to a mass audience, right? And not everyone gets these in the recruiting process, but it's not super customizable to you because you're submitting it as kind of like part of your application. So the bank is probably not gonna like ask you super specific questions about your experience or anything because like they don't know you yet, right? Like they're gonna ask things that are relatively generic. So things like, why investment banking? Why this bank? What do you think about our culture? Tell me about yourself. All of the things that we've already practiced in terms of our fundamental behavioral questions and our inevitable questions, make sure you practice those. So in my experience, these are the types of questions that tend to come up in a higher view or a pre-recorded video interview type of situation. Now, when you're practicing this, practice your timing as far as answering each question. And this is important because these pre-recorded videos usually have strict time limits on how long your answer can be for any given question. And it's usually about 1 minute or so. It just depends on how they set it up. But this is really important because when you're in real life, it's unlikely that someone's going to stop you at 1 minute and 6 seconds. They're just going to let you finish your thought. But with the software that's out there right now, like if your answer hits 1 minute or whatever it is, 90 seconds, and you're not done, like it's just gonna stop recording. And then you might be in a situation where you get something submitted where you have an incomplete thought or it looks like you have a run-on response. So you definitely don't want that. So practice your timing. And then one other thing that I'll share, and this is more of a bonus tip, it's not as applicable to the general population, but if you want to go the extra mile here, check your audio levels. Half of what makes video effective is great audio. And I'm speaking from the perspective of a future investment banker and a podcaster, right? So this is something that I care a lot about, I think a lot about. It's not super necessary because audio technology has gotten to the point where your standard laptop microphone will give you decent-ish quality and your phone will give you decent-ish quality, especially if you have a higher-end phone. But, if you want to go that extra mile, you can have a small, what's called a lavalier microphone. And I'll put a link to what that looks like in the show notes of this episode. But these are just these little tiny microphones with a wire that you can clip to your shirt and you can plug it into your computer, and it helps your answers sound much more clear and crisp. I've used this personally for some of these types of situations because it's just a nice little mic that I can I can have that's going to get really close to my mouth without having like my studio microphone, which right now is literally directly in front of my mouth as I'm talking, because that doesn't look good on video. So that little lavalier mic that I can clip to my shirt is going to give me what I need in a more discreet way. So that's just like more of a bonus thing if you want to really, really go for it. But most important thing, practice in front of the camera, not in front of a mirror, not in front of your dog, not while you're like taking a walk. Practice in front of a camera. You want to simulate the actual experience that you're going to have when you're doing these pre-recorded interviews. So that's what I would personally suggest. That's what I personally did, and it ended up working out well. So those are some tips for you for pre-recorded video interviews, specifically the pre-recorded ones as opposed to a live video interview, which a lot of the same principles carry over. But yeah, so those are becoming more common in this world of investment banking recruiting. Thought I'd share that with you. Shay, I hope you got some good value out of that. Hope I answered your question well. Thank you for listening, my friends, and I'll see you next time.